Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, where we believe Benjamin Franklin's advice that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest, both in finances and in your life. Every episode teaches you personal finance and long-term investing in simple terms. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cramer.
Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, episode 114. I'm Jesse Cramer. By day, I work at a fiduciary wealth management firm helping clients nationwide. You can learn more at bestinterest.blog/work. The link is in the show notes. And by night, I write the Best Interest blog. I host this podcast. I put out a weekly email newsletter, all of which helps busy professionals and retirees avoid mistakes and grow their wealth by simplifying their investing, taxes, and retirement planning. Later in today's episode, Kellen Klein will be joining me. Kellen is local to me here in Rochester, and he's the co-founder of the Savvy Couple Brands, a huge online personal finance platform that he runs with his wife, Brittany, been recognized by Forbes and Time and other publications. And Kellen has a really unique story. He went from working full-time as a jail deputy in the county jail to paying off 6 figures of debt, quitting that job in the jail while he was building this amazing business all over the course of a few short years, especially in hindsight. This isn't going to be an episode where all we do is kind of sing Kellen's praises and tell you to go check him out. But rather, the point of this episode is kind of learn about the process and the risks and the planning that went into starting a business, that went into growing that business, that went into the monumental decision of quitting his then career to pursue the business full time. And also some of the financial planning and household financial sacrifices required to ensure that Brittany and Kellen maximize their probability of success. And now, why are we talking about those things today? Because of the thousands of you listening to this podcast, I know for a fact that plenty of you have ideas rattling around in your heads to maybe leave your 9-to-5 early to start your own business, to pursue some sort of passionate side hustle, to start doing contract work or consulting part-time as part of your retirement plan. And like all major projects in life, doing one of those things requires a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, a lot of foresight. And I think we can all learn something interesting today from Kellen's successes, from the stories he has to tell us, and also from the failures, really, from the good, the bad, and the ugly of the real life lessons that Kellen and Brittany went through to start their brand, to start their business. But before Kellen joins us today, we do have a review of the week and then some monologue thoughts from me. The review of the week from Clint Money. Great for the beginner to the expert, 5 stars. Jesse does a great job of explaining financial topics in great detail so nobody gets left behind. The guests he has on his show are top-notch as well. I'm looking forward to years of great content. Well, Clint, thank you very much for the kind words. Feel free to drop me an email at jesse@bestinterest.blog, and I will send you a super soft podcast t-shirt. And before Kellen joins us, before we take a deep dive into entrepreneurship, into owning your own business, into a side hustle, you need some financial flexibility to pull that off. So I was thinking about this article I wrote in March of 2024. At the time, my friend's daughter, she was 21 years old. She had just bought her first car, a very big financial move. And she had lots of options of what car she wanted to buy. Was she going to look for, the used Honda, the used Toyota, the used Kia? Lots of frugal experts would point to that kind of decision. Was she going to buy something that was new, but, maybe reasonable? That's what I did for my first car. I bought a brand new 2012 Toyota RAV4. It was new at the time, but I thought a pretty reasonable car to buy. I drove it for 160,000 miles or something like that. I got my money out of it. Or was my friend's daughter going to go all out? There are places to be, and she's got people to impress, and she wants a cool car. Well, for better or for worse, this young woman went with option 3. She bought a 2024 Ford Bronco for roughly $50,000, a very cool car, one of the most popular cars in America since the Bronco came back to life in 2021. And that cool factor, if you will, was essential for this young woman. It's what she wanted. But by stretching her finances with this purchase, she damaged her financial flexibility in other areas of life. That ability to absorb financial downfalls, to react to financial changes, to find contentment at various consumption levels. I think about the world of physical fitness, where stretching improves our physical flexibility, and that flexibility prevents muscle or joint-related injuries or what have you. But I also think that maintaining proper financial flexibility helps cushion the financial blows that life will inevitably throw your way. The sudden expense, the loss of a job, when your dog eats the tennis ball and needs, emergency veterinary care. Those kind of flexibilities are really important. And my friend, whose daughter bought the Bronco, discussed how she felt this great discontent with the idea of driving around in a used, junky car, which I totally get. All else equal, a cool new car is way better and way cooler than an old junky car. But all else isn't equal. That's the problem. I mean, namely the price, or more accurately, the cost per mile of the Bronco is going to be way more than that of the used junky car. And we all know someone who fits this mold. They just have to have the nicest stuff. And I think for those people, it is important that we try to hit them, or if you find yourself in those shoes, I know in some places in life, I might find myself in those shoes. And I try to hit myself with this all-timer of a quote, which is, look around you. All of that stuff, it used to be money. And all of that money, it used to be time. The question becomes, are you content? Are you fulfilled? Are you happy? And it's different strokes for different folks. Some people need that fancy Bronco, while other people despise spending their hard-earned dollars on a depreciating asset. And the question is, how much of your time are you willing to trade for that stuff? I think it's a superpower to feel content and to feel fulfilled at multiple spending levels. And that idea, I don't think, can be emphasized enough. Overspending is typically tied to some sort of search for contentment. And very rarely is that contentment found, for example, behind the wheel of a car, behind the wheel of a Ford Bronco. And we are all different. I get that. Our contentment flexibility will vary depending on the topic. We each have areas of life where we say, hell yes, and we happily pay higher prices. And for you, it might be nice dinners or dog toys or a nice bottle of wine. For me, it's squash rackets or books for our daughter. Lots of books for our daughter. High quality baking ingredients. I like making a good batch of cookies. And I don't mind spending money on that stuff. We each have the different stuff that we want to spend money on. But if you can still be happy at various spending levels, your financial life is bound to improve. And to some, financial flexibility means having room in your budget. Life will throw you curveballs. Can you roll with the punches and keep your head above water? You've probably seen headlines before like, 47% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency expense. Now, whether that headline is true or just some sort of bastardization of polling data, the fact remains a lot of people don't have much room in their budgets, and their situation is kind of like a pane of glass and it shatters under the slightest bump. A healthy emergency fund solves that problem by providing them with flexibility. And it's kind of ironic because their flexibility is created in the first place by saying no. Right? We have to say no to things in order to build that flexibility in our lives. But then having that flexibility empowers us to eventually start saying yes to things. We have to choose not to spend money to grow the emergency fund. A penny saved is a penny earned. But the benefit of our budgetary flexibility is eventually, hey, some sudden fun spending opportunity arises and we get to say yes. I think it's also worth thinking about geographic flexibility. Would you be happy living in New York City? Would you also be happy living in, rural Iowa? If you have the lifestyle flexibility to move to a low cost of living area, that's a pretty amazing financial superpower. Just for kicks and giggles, I compared New York City to Sioux Falls, Iowa. The overall cost of living is more than 100% higher in New York City. And if you're listening to this in Iowa, let me know. Specifically, New York City rent is about 300% higher than Sioux City. Restaurant prices are about 100% higher. Groceries are about 75% more. So if you're tied down to a high cost of living area, tied down, literally, you're not flexible in that way, then it kind of just is what it is. I'm not going to tell someone to abandon New York City and abandon your family to save money in Iowa. But if you can move to a low cost of living area, even if you can move to a mid cost of living area, what's stopping you? I know since COVID, that's happened a lot around here in upstate New York, in Rochester and Buffalo and Syracuse. I just specifically here in Rochester, a lot of families, a lot of younger families who maybe originally were from Rochester, they left the nest, so to speak. They settled in greater New York City. They settled in DC. They settled in Boston, Chicago, mostly central and East Coast cities. And then during COVID, probably because of the remote work and all the flexibility that gave them, they'd come back to Rochester, making us one of the hottest housing markets in the country, because that same family that maybe was trying to get a pretty normal, quote unquote normal 2,000 square foot house in Boston for $1.5 million, that $1.5 million buys them one of the nicest houses in Rochester. And in fact, they can get a much nicer house than they could in Boston for probably like half the price here in Rochester. Anyway, it's a story for another day. But the point, again, is geographic flexibility. Next, I think about the question, does money actually buy happiness? One of my colleagues, Chris, when he meets with clients, he often says, I'm not sure if money buys happiness. Maybe it's different for different people, but money certainly buys flexibility. And for me, flexibility does often lead to more happiness. And I think he's got a really good point. Most of us want options in life, and that's what financial flexibility is all about. We want the option, ideally, to afford anything, but, like Paula Pant might say, if you know Paula, you can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. And that's a really important financial flexibility idea to take home with us. Next, when I was thinking of Kellen's story, what you're all about to hear from Kellen's story today, I think of that fork in the road that he and his wife Brittany must have faced. That fork in the road that said, do we continue? Does Kellen continue down his career of being a guard at the county jail? Or does he go for broke and run the business? And it reminded me of a fork in the road, so to speak, from the financial independence movement. So this is from an article, December 2022, I wrote called Two Roads to Financial Independence. And I was reminded of, Robert Frost's poem, Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, most people know of that poem, The Road Not Taken, especially those last few lines that I just quoted. And most people interpret the poem as, well, Robert Frost's choice, his choice made all the difference, and it made all the difference in a good way. And so Robert Frost is telling us to break the mold, to be different, to create some extraordinary life, right? Two roads diverged in a wood. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So do the unique thing and make all the difference. But if we actually read the poem closely, Frost doesn't really make that claim. The road less traveled is neither good nor bad. He's not really passing any judgment on the path that one takes. Instead, his point is that the decisions we make in life, like a fork in the road, they steer us in a certain direction that cannot be undone. And because of that, even a tiny decision can make, quote unquote, all the difference. Maybe good, maybe bad, but it can make all the difference in your life. And I think of it, one road leads to another road, or one fork leads to another fork, and then another fork, and then another fork. And that Robert Frost, he would never again find himself at that particular intersection. His choice, left or right, led to these future disparate decisions, but would never lead back to where he stood at that moment, to that particular decision. And he says this in the poem. He says, "Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back." In the long run, a simple fork in the road can fundamentally change your life. It's a little bit like chaos theory, or that apocryphal idea that a butterfly's flight in South America changes the direction of a major hurricane over the Atlantic, that small changes in input can cause massive shifts in output. And time only moves in one direction. There are no counterfactuals in life. If I had done this instead of that, I would be over here instead of over there. You can't pretend you would know how that actually works out. You can't pretend you would know what would have happened if you had made the other choice. You can't be certain. But nevertheless, we do dwell on opportunities missed. If I had gone to that party in grad school, I would have met Margot Robbie, and now I'd be married to a famous actress. Well, you can't really do that. But we never even really begin to think about disasters that we've averted. I think this is a really cool thought. Maybe you do too. Maybe you never thought about it. But maybe if I'd gone to that party with Margot Robbie, some distracted driver would have T-boned my car at the stoplight and broken my leg. And just think about it. When was the last time you considered that a few mundane choices in your past have probably saved your life by avoiding some sort of fatal accident? You might scoff, but that's certainly a train of thought less traveled. And as Robert Frost writes in the poem about sitting there at that fork in the road, he says, "And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair." So the point being is that you can only take one path. And now time for the second path of this little diatribe about Robert Frost and the FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. It strikes me as this Frostian bargain. And yes, I know it's a Faustian bargain, but this is a Frostian bargain. And the basics of FIRE are pretty straightforward. If you earn more, you spend less, you can become financially independent, no longer tied to your employer's mandates. You can retire much earlier than traditional Western civilization retirement dates. FIRE folks, they generally take Robert Frost's path. They take the path less traveled. They, eschew the common 9-to-5 for 40 years career by striving usually for higher incomes, definitely by lowering their spending, and by investing the difference. And that combination for them, it makes all the difference. But like those who kind of misread Robert Frost's poem, the FIRE movement occasionally conflates different with better. And different and better aren't always the same thing. And now, granted, I'm cherry picking these, but I picked these 5 headlines from the Financial Independence subreddit in recent months. And I want to see if you can spot the common thread. So again, I'm just going to read 5 headlines here. "I retired early at 36. It's been 2 years and I'm feeling lost. Your FIRE obsession may be a symptom of stress. I fired at 30 and now I'm lost, depressed, and don't know what to do. living in the future, or why fire won't make you happy. And then the last one, is the pursuit of fire just a temporary distraction from unhappiness? And again, I did cherry pick those headlines. There are also many great stories of FIRE, financial independence success, and the road less traveled, after all, can make all the difference in both directions. But yeah, FIRE is the road less traveled, but it's not always the better road. Now, my personal story is just another example. FIRE was a huge part of my initial interest in personal finance and investing. And that interest led to the creation of The Best Interest. It led to me changing careers. It led to this podcast. And that's just a huge fundamental part of my life when I think back on it. And I was full steam ahead on the FIRE path in my old engineering career. I was on the fastest path to FIRE that I could possibly muster. I was Mr. Rice and Beans, Mr. Coffee at Home, brown bag lunches every single day. But stories that are similar to the headlines, the 5 headlines that I just read, I felt something in my life that something wasn't quite right. I was on a better path, right? I mean, that's what I was asking myself. This is supposed to be the better path. But if it's the better path, why doesn't it always feel better? And for years, I couldn't really put my finger on the problem. Now, coincidentally, the work that I'm doing on the Best Interest blog, here on this podcast, the work that I'm now doing full time, helped me discover my issue. And simply put, I didn't enjoy the day-to-day work of my engineering career. And rather than running towards early retirement, I was really using financial independence to run away from an unfulfilling job. I found out that the mind starts to rebel when you force it to be passionate about escapism. That's where I found myself. But I did love the work of writing, of podcasting, of helping my readers and now my clients achieving their financial goals. And this is something that I'm not looking for an escape route from. If anything, I wanted more time to write, to podcast, to help people. And now that I've been doing that, now that I've been working full-time in financial planning for 3.5 years as I record this, I'm no longer really focused on reaching FIRE. I just really like doing what I do. And sure, I'm still watching our household finances. I'm still making sure that we're investing our money wisely. But I've really separated the FI, the financial independence, from the RE, the retirement early. I think financial independence is something we all want at the end of the day, but I'm no longer racing to an early retirement. Instead, I'm now on this slow FI path. I'm saving less, I'm spending more. Yes, you heard that right. I'm saving less, I'm spending more. I'm still saving. I'm just not saving quite as much as I was when I was, Mr. Rice and Beans. I'm enjoying the present rather than wishing it all away, rather than straining towards this supposedly better future. And in some ways, that makes me an outlier when I compare myself to other financial bloggers or other FIRE heroes or other spreadsheet nerds. I'm on the road less taken. But for me, it's making all the difference. Okay, that's that for that article. But then the last one before Kellen joins us today, it's a little bit maybe off topic, but it struck me because I've gotten a bunch of emails in the last month, in the last 6 weeks, just a bunch of emails about people inheriting money from relatives who've passed away. And based on demographics, based on aging baby boomers, I think that trend is just going to keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. People like us, people like those of us listening to this podcast right now, we are going to be inheriting money in the future. So I wanted to share this advice I gave to someone who recently inherited $600,000, a pretty big chunk of change. So here are all the thoughts and the questions I recommended that she work through. So in this particular case, Felicia and her husband received a $600,000 inheritance. She said they earn modest incomes, they live pretty modestly, they don't know what to do with the money or how to best handle it. They have about $40,000 of student debt at a 5% interest rate. They have an apartment, but they'd like to buy a house. Their ideal home would cost $500,000. They already have $50,000 set aside for that. They contribute to their 401k accounts. They contribute to Roth IRA accounts. They've never earned enough money to be able to max them out. And they're at a loss in a few areas when it comes to the inheritance. What don't they know, right? We don't know what we don't know. And what are the big things that they're likely missing? They have questions about taxes. Do they need to be worried about taxes this year or in future years? They're thinking about spending, right? $600,000. This seems like a really big chance for them, but they're scared. In her words, in Felicia's words, they're petrified of spending it and ruining their future. But at the same time, again, in her words, they don't want to die on a pile of unspent cash. And then last, of course, is investing. Should her investing strategy change? So what an interesting question. And again, what a question that will likely apply to a lot of us over the coming years. So let's start with taxes. Taxes are a pretty easy one that we can tackle quickly. And we'll start with inheritance taxes. And it's important, we're going to differentiate here between inheritance taxes and estate taxes. Inheritance taxes get charged to the recipient of an inheritance, like Felicia. Estate taxes get charged to the estate of the deceased person prior to the money being distributed to the inheritors. So In Felicia's case, she already dodged the estate taxes. Estate taxes might have applied to the person who died in Felicia's case, but not to Felicia herself. Anyway, we're going to go back to inheritance taxes, those that get charged to the recipient, like Felicia. Thankfully, there is no federal inheritance tax. 6 states, although I think actually one of the 6 states, I don't remember which one, I think it's only 5 states now. I think one of the 6 states recently ended their inheritance tax. But either way, 5 or 6 states charge inheritance taxes: Nebraska, Iowa, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. So, inheritance tax. Estate taxes. We'll go on to estate taxes. As I said before, get charged to the estate of the deceased person prior to money being distributed to the inheritors. There is a federal estate tax, but it kicks in at enormous amounts of wealth. $14 million for individuals, $28 million for couples. And then some states, though, it's important to have estate taxes as well. Now, I believe this is a pretty comprehensive list of the states that have estate taxes: Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, Illinois, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and Hawaii. I think that's it for state estate taxes. But either way, if you live in one of those states, it's worth understanding what your state's estate taxes are. Or even if you don't live in one of those states, you might just want to double check and make sure that I got that right for your state. Capital gains taxes. How do capital gains taxes apply to inheritances? Usually they don't, especially at the time that the inheritance is given. But if the assets in your inheritance, maybe stocks or a home, if that appreciates in value, you will probably eventually owe capital gains taxes if and when you decide to sell that asset. So again, if you inherit a house from grandpa, if you inherit stocks from grandpa, you don't know any capital gains when you inherit that asset. But if you choose to hold on to that asset for a long time and that asset grows in value and then you sell it, you will likely owe capital gains taxes on the difference between the price you sell it at and the value when you inherited it. And then last, income taxes. Again, income taxes generally don't apply to inheritances, except in one very common case, which is an inherited 401k or an inherited IRA. The deceased person likely never paid income taxes on any of those traditional retirement account contributions. So the IRS mandates that the person who inherits the account, that's us, pay income taxes from their inherited IRA. As of this recording, moving forward, I should say, for non-spouses, if you inherit an IRA from someone other than your spouse, the current tax code stipulates that all of the assets in that inherited IRA must be withdrawn within 10 years of the decedent's death, and that you, the inheritor, will pay income taxes on those distributions based on your income tax rates. So let's move on to spending, Felicia's next concern. Her concern over spending, I think, is the epitome of personal finance, right? $600,000, it's a lot of money, no matter who you are, but especially if you've come from a modest background, like Felicia said. And I think she's right to see this inheritance as a really big financial opportunity. But I really want to dispel Felicia's feeling of being petrified. This inheritance is an opportunity for good, for flexibility, like we just talked about. It's an opportunity for choice, for some fun. And just ask yourself, would you rather have $600,000 or zero? And the fact that we all have the same answer to that question suggests that Felicia's inheritance, at least financially, is a positive thing for her, right? Notwithstanding the fact that someone in her life died. I realize that's a negative thing, again, most likely. But the fact that she has the $600,000, that's a positive thing. So where do the negative feelings come from? It sounds like part of Felicia's fear is the potential, and again, the potential future regret if she and her husband somehow screw up this scenario. They never thought they'd get this lucky to inherit $600,000. So what if they don't seize that opportunity, right? What if they let themselves down? What if they let their family down? It's like Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe there's the same thing here. With great inheritance comes great responsibility. And I think this is why financial planning matters. Felicia and her husband, they need to build a plan for their assets. Something like the financial order of operations is a great starting place. Based on the details that Felicia shared with me, that I shared with you at the beginning of this little reading, their plan should probably include somewhere in there a small amount of money for immediate fun use. Now, there's no hard rule, but something in the ballpark of, 5% of the total or $10,000, something like that. It's like, Felicia, go take that trip you've always been wishing for, or whatever that is for you. The financial plan should probably also include some debt payoff. Considering Felicia brought it up, I would recommend she immediately pay off the $40,000 in student debt, especially, assuming that payments have started up again for her. There's not really any sense in paying off loans while the payments and interest are deferred. I think it'll ease her burden. Again, she cared enough about it to mention it in her question. And that payoff is the equivalent to a 5% return on those assets. It doesn't mean that debt payoff should always be part of all inheritance scenarios, but in this case, I think it's smart advice. I think Felicia should probably also earmark some of the money for a home purchase. She talked about a $500,000 being their home budget. 20% down is a typical home payment. She should earmark $100,000 for the home payment. Granted, more is probably better. There are, pesky closing costs. And if Felicia's home purchase timeline is ASAP, if she and her husband want to buy a home as soon as possible, I'd recommend she set aside at least $100,000 today into a high yield savings account for that specific purpose. The next thing I think should be part of her financial plan is what I call endowed spending. She talked about the desire to avoid dying on a pile of unspent cash. And I think it makes sense for her to pre-plan a small percentage of spending every year. Maybe something in the 1% to 2% range, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 feels about right. Felicia could spend it on fun. She could spend it on making many small facets of life a little bit better. And to accomplish this, I think Felicia should think about money. Again, I called it endowed spending, almost in the same way that a college thinks about its endowment. She could take a chunk of money, maybe it's $150,000 or $200,000 today, invest it into a conservative, diversified portfolio for the specific purpose of annual purposeful spending. And we'll talk about that idea again down when I mention investing. And if you're keeping track at home, we've earmarked maybe $300,000 to $350,000 of Felicia's $600,000 inheritance. We talked about maybe $10,000, $20,000 for some fun right away. We talked about $40,000 to pay off college debt, $100,000 for a home down payment, and maybe $150,000 or $200,000 for that ongoing endowed spending. But now the question comes up, what do we do with the remaining $300,000 or $250,000? And that remainder of Felicia's inheritance should be, in my opinion, invested for the long haul. But other portions of her quote-unquote spending assets should probably be invested too. Now, what do I mean? Well, her specific investing allocation depends on the unique goals, the unique timelines of her life and of her assets. So for the home purchase, we already covered that the $100,000 should be invested, maybe deposited is the better word, into a high yield savings account, earmarked for the home purchase. It's in cash. It's safe, insured by the FDIC, earning something like 4% in today's interest rate environment. Now, the endowed spending that maybe she sets aside $150,000 or $200,000 for that annual purposeful spending, that money should be invested. Now, truly invested. I don't think it should be in cash. Now, why is that? Well, some of the $150,000 certainly is short term. Again, if she's spending, call it $10,000 a year out of this endowment, one of the $10,000 chunks is going to happen this year, and that's short term. But a lot of those $10,000 expenditures are going to be long term. And if we think about that $150,000 as a true endowment, like a university might, then the $150,000 in principal should mostly be left alone, at least as much as possible. So something like a 50% bond and 50% stock allocation for that $150,000 combines Felicia's need for both short-term capital, but also for this reasonably conservative long-term growth. And then last, we have Felicia's true long-term money. The remaining $300,000, $250,000, again, depending on her math, should be invested for the long run. Depending on Felicia's specific risk tolerance, a stock allocation of 70% all the way up to 100% is probably appropriate, with the remaining assets, the difference from 100%, those assets in bonds, or maybe she's seeking further diversification, real estate, alternatives, what have you. Now, for now, we can say she invests those assets at 80% stocks, 20% bonds. And again, if we, depending on the exact numbers that we use here, we can see that Felicia's total portfolio, kind of from the bottom up, is roughly 25% cash. So if we add up the assets that were already on Felicia's balance sheet, plus the decisions we've made with this new $600,000, we see that Felicia's total kind of liquid portfolio becomes approximately 25% cash, 25% bonds, and about 50% stocks. Now, that might be a big change from Felicia's prior investing allocation, but our logical investing framework from the bottom up, right, that ought to work for just about anyone at just about any crossroads in their life. First, we identified her goals. Then we applied dollar amounts to those goals. We determined timelines to reach those goals, to reach those dollar amounts, and then we invested appropriately. Shorter timelines demanded lower risk assets. Longer timelines demanded higher risk assets. So from the bottom up, we built this portfolio. So what else? What else did Felicia and I potentially miss so far? Well, Felicia and her husband should certainly start maxing out their Roth IRA every year. She mentioned that they contribute, but they've never maxed it out. If nothing else, they should pull $14,000 from their long-term taxable money, deposit that into their Roth IRAs to make sure they're maxing out their Roths basically every year going forward. Should they also max out their 401k? Well, they should definitely get the match, right? Always get the employer match. It's free money. But beyond that free money, I think they can weigh the pros and cons, the benefits, the detriments of the 401k tax advantage against the cost, the illiquidity of locking up their money until retirement age. And I have some articles that I break down that math. And now that Felicia and her family have some assets, they should certainly revisit their estate plan if they had one in the first place. Talking with an estate planning attorney, a CFP financial planner, great places to start on that front. And then last, I think it's important to point out, Felicia seems to be doing a pretty good job of doing her homework, of figuring out, of taking her time, of putting a plan together, of asking for help. Especially with such large sums of money involved, you don't want to rush into these kind of decisions. You also, in my opinion, you don't want to delay too long. You need to take your time, you need to do your research, but then you need to execute a plan. And I think Felicia is doing a great job there too. Here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. Did you know my written blog, The Best Interest, was nominated for 2022 Personal Finance Blog of the Year, and it's been highlighted in the Wall Street Journal, Yahoo Finance, and on CNBC? I love writing, especially when that writing is to share financial education, and I usually write 1 or 2 articles per week. You can read them all at bestinterest.blog. Again, the web address is bestinterest.blog. Check it out. But now, without further ado, I want to welcome Kellen Klein here onto the show. Again, Kellen's the co-founder of The Savvy Couple, a very successful online personal finance brand. But today, I really want to focus with Kellen on some of the interesting decisions, choices, plans, successes, and failures that went into not only starting his business, but eventually leaving his old career entirely, going, like Hernan Cortez when he landed in Mexico, despite all the terrible things he did, burning the boats behind him, and just going whole hog into this new venture. So I think we have a lot of exciting and interesting things to learn from Kellen. Kellen, thank you for being here today. And as I explained in your little bio read just now, I mean, you've got a really cool business that you started from scratch. And part of your business model is helping others kind of pursue some similar things in their own lives. So I'd love to start with this kind of big question, which is, how do you think that entrepreneurship, running your own business, can fit into someone's long-term wealth strategy?
Great question. Thanks for having me on the show, Jesse. Excited to talk money, personal finance, financial freedom. This is right up my alley. So yeah, I think just starting side hustles, I think my wife and I kind of realized with our 9-to-5s, it was kind of dead end. We were going to be able to kind of get that 3% raise every year, but we really wanted to make sure that we were living the life that we wanted to. And the way to do that is to use leverage and get as much income coming in as possible to cover our expenses, but not only cover our expenses, but have enough that we can invest in the future, start early and often, and really kind of just scale that gap between our living expenses and what we're taking in each month. So we're all about creating as many additional income streams as possible and increasing income as much as possible as well.
You used a couple words there. One was leverage and one was scale. What do those words specifically mean to you in this entrepreneurial lens?
So with a 9-to-5, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have 9-to-5s, you're kind of limited on your scale because you're trading your time for money, whether it's a salary or an hourly job. That's kind of what you're going to make. Whereas in business, it's really unlimited depending on the type of business you run, because you can leverage other people's time, you can leverage tools, you can leverage pricing models, recurring revenue, all sorts of different things. So the nice thing about trying to reach financial freedom quickly, which was our goal, is that you can, when you break free from the 9-to-5 and really get into this world of entrepreneurship, you see all the possibilities out there and you get to use that leverage. And that leverage helps you scale your hourly rate to a spot. We were able to scale it like way higher than we ever thought was even possible in our lifetime, and really use that leverage to scale our income and scale our freedom.
I mean, you offered before we started recording, you offered that you'd be willing to share some numbers. I mean, let's talk about that hourly
Sure.
rate or just that power of scale and leverage a little bit. I mean, do you mind sharing
Absolutely.
over what kind of timeline you guys have been doing this and then where you were before you started and where you are now?
Sure. So I'll give a quick background. I was a jail deputy before we started being entrepreneurs. I kind of did online business and drop shipping and just selling stuff on eBay all the time when I was growing up. So I always had the itch for entrepreneurship, went to school for business and finance. And anyways, got into the jail deputy role and really kind of fell into a deep depression and realized I need to do something more out of life. I need to be in control of my time. I really value my time like crazy. So from there, I was making like 26 an hour. I think I could have topped out near 100K, you know, six-figure job, but this would have been, 25 years in the jail and it would have been miserable. And I saw the writing on the wall with law enforcement. My goal was to get to road patrol, and I didn't want to do that either because I wanted to be home with my family on nights and weekends and holidays and not miss things and not have that stress of that job. So I went from 26 an hour down to 13 an hour working as an office manager at Roberts Westland Christian College near us, and kind of reinvented myself and found my identity again. And then we launched our blog, The Savvy Couple, in 2016. And I worked for basically 9 months, not making any money. And I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are willing to do that. They're willing to lose money and work for free for an extended period of time because they know long-term it's going to pay off. I'm sure same thing with your podcast here. So took a huge dip and was making, next to nothing and realizing I'm going to start this business. We're going to figure it out. I'm going to leverage, my skill set and continue to develop that. So anyways, the 9th month I made $50 online. It was a light bulb that went off, and I went to Brittany 2 weeks later and said, Britt, this is my chance. I can make it happen. Let me quit. And I wasn't making much at the time anyway. So she's like, sure, please. I'm tired of you complaining about jobs. I quit my job pretty quickly after that and then went full-time into freelancing and running the business and scaled it. The first year, I think we made 50,000. The second year we made six figures. And then the following year we made multiple six figures. And then my wife quit her job as a teacher to join me full-time, continued to really develop the business and develop the blog and develop the traffic and the skill set and continue to invest in ourselves, which I think is the best investment you can have in investing in your own self, because it really helps you scale your income and just your ability to multiply your income through investing. But anyways, to get to the numbers, I currently in our business make over $1,000 an hour, which is insane. I really don't work too many hours a day. I try to stick to like a 4-hour window, and I do really productive, really high quality, high EHR tasks, which is effective hourly rate, and really focus on CEO stuff and let our team kind of do the rest. And it's been mind blowing.
It's a pretty long journey from $13 an hour at Roberts Wesleyan College. But it is something I was thinking, and one of the questions I sent to you beforehand is you hear this story, especially now that we're kind of midway through the story. I'm not going to say you're at the end of the story, but you're midway through the story. And it is emotionally tempting to be like, oh, I want to do exactly that. And when you found yourself working in the county jail, the city jail, it was probably emotionally tempting to be like, I just want to get out of here. But how can a listener right now who maybe wants to escape the 9-to-5 or they just like the idea of entrepreneurship, how can they realistically start to evaluate whether it's financially smart or not for them to follow your path?
So yeah, a lot of times, like you said, I'm so glad you asked this question. A lot of times people hear these stories and be like, oh, I'm going to do it. And then it's like, they don't have any plan in place. They haven't gotten their finances in order. They don't even talk to their spouse and get them on board, which is probably the most important thing. So first off, get excited, get motivated, get inspired, but also slow down and let's create a plan. So the thing that we did was we sat at a dinner table, and I remember it so vividly because it was probably the most life-changing conversation we ever had in our marriage. And I was like, Britt, this is not working. Like, we had this plan that I was going to be a police officer. You're going to be a teacher. We're going to have, summers off and travel with our family together. I'm miserable right now. Miserable. I need a change. So how do we figure out how to get more freedom in our life? And, number one was figuring out what our vision looked like together. So how much money do we need to be making? Does it need to be passive? How much cash flow needs to come in? What do our expenses look like? How much debt do we still have? We still had student loan debt. So basically got everything on the table and kind of created our dream life together and really, put it on pen to paper. And it was huge to be able to visually see that together. And then we really dove into the budget. Where are we spending our money that we don't need to be? It's kind of wasting our hard-earned money, especially if I'm trying to quit. I want to, have our budget absolutely dialed bare minimum. And we suffered for at least 6 months, like really trying to save and pay off debt and just get a big nest egg for me to quit my job. So For about 6 months, there was no eating out. There was no going out to the bar. There was, no going out to entertainment, anything like this. And we were in our 20s, no kids. So we were just like, we're going to grind it out for 6 months, pay off as much debt as possible, grow this nest egg of, I think we had like 40 or 50,000 at the time, which was a really good nest egg for us. And, let me do this entrepreneurship thing for a full year. And that gave us kind of the window and the runway where I could dive into it full time and not be worried about finances. We were living off Brittany's teacher salary at the time. So we really took our budget down to one income, which was awesome. It allowed me to have the freedom to explore different things and make good, sound financial decisions and, decisions with investing in the business and where to scale and where to, focus my time and energy and not be so wrapped up in, oh my gosh, I got to make money right now. It kind of gave me that freedom. But yeah, align with your marriage, get a vision together, master your money and get it, your bare bones budget. And then instead of just jumping into it full time and being like, hey, I'm quitting my job, I hate it. Sometimes that's necessary. If you're like really struggling, like sometimes quitting your job is a must just for mental health. But there's always other opportunities. I think the biggest thing is create the side hustle first. Like spend the extra time instead of Netflix every night, 4 hours of binging Netflix, like prove the concept, whether it's an online business or you're starting a pressure washing business, one of those boring businesses that cash flow really well. Whatever it may be, like start it and prove that you can make some money with it and then scale it to the point where, hey, if I actually put all my time and effort into this, could far exceed how much I'm making at my job. And then that's the time you kind of jump safely. Or you can do it like me and do it after you made $50.
I get from your point of view, you almost kind of like burn the ships, as they say, right? Like there's no going back. I mean, I suppose you always could have decided to stop and go back. But when you quit your job and committed fully to this, you really decided to not go back. But yeah, that whole proof of concept thing, I think, is really big. At the same time, though, there's this, if you go down the proof of concept path, you're kind of leaving yourself a little wiggle room to back out and make an excuse for yourself. So I don't know. Do you have any tips or tricks when it comes to like, okay, maybe you don't want to take the huge risk of quitting your job right away. But at the same time, if you're going to do this proof of concept, you still want to make sure you do it well and you focus on the way that it can actually work out for you in the long run. And you want to prevent your own ability to make excuses and quit early. So, I mean, any thoughts on that front?
Yeah, I think everyone's different. I was at the point where I was six jobs in after college, and like every single one, I came to this conclusion of like, this is not for me. I have to do something on my own. Plus, we can talk about it. I'm very risk averse. Like I realize we have one life and I am going all in on things. And like, if it works, great. If not, I'll, collect the pieces and build something else. I think it's important to kind of lean into your personality and go with what feels comfortable with you. But yeah, I think it is important to potentially have a plan B in place. The worst thing you want to do is like go all in on something, it doesn't work, and then you're homeless. Like make sure you can keep food on the table and a house over your head, and then you're in good shape.
Well, let's talk about that risk aversion then, because on the one hand, absolutely, the idea of quitting your job after making $50 online sounds like a huge risk. It is a huge risk. It was a huge risk. But at the same time, you and Brittany, right, you set aside this emergency fund, you planned out your monthly expenses, you built a safety net into this plan that certainly de-risked you. So what are your thoughts just in general? I mean, owning your own business is such a big risk. So what are your thoughts about risk in the business place, in entrepreneurship, how to take these big swings in the world of entrepreneurship while maybe maintaining some level of conservatism overall in your finances?
It's important to have kind of a blueprint, and looking back, our timing, we were really blessed with the timing of all this. We had no kids, which I can't imagine, starting a business with a full-time job with kids. That'd be really hard. We have a lot of people that follow us that do that. But, we had it super easy because we could put all of our time and effort into that without kids. And then, my wife just got her teaching job, so she was getting paid pretty well. We had good health insurance. Like the timing of it was absolutely perfect. So I think entrepreneurship, there's a lot to say about timing, realizing patterns and jumping on them when they arise. We de-risked as much as possible by having, our bare bone budget. And we knew my wife's salary could cover our living expenses. So we're not going to lose the house. We're going to always have food on the table. And worst case, I have to get another job that I hate. And then I do that for 6 months and try something else. It really comes down to money. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and money is the tool that gives you the freedom and gives you food on your table and a roof over your head and a car to drive in. So it's really being able to master your money and, know to the dollar on a budget where things are going and how much money you need coming in. And once you can understand that and you can control your spending and your investing with kind of discipline, the rest becomes really easy. If you want to use leverage and get in entrepreneurship, you got to take risks to earn more money and leverage and increase your income. But a lot of times, entrepreneurship's not for everyone. I used to have the mindset that like, oh my gosh, anyone can do entrepreneurship. Like, I don't know why all my friends aren't doing it. Like, there's so many people around me that I see have skills that could monetize them and impact the world. But a lot of times I'd say I'm a big proponent of 80-20 rule. I think like 20% of people are really meant to be entrepreneurs and 80% love the security of a 9-to-5, and that's totally fine. I know so many friends that love their job and they get a ton of fulfillment from it and it provides for their family. And there's nothing wrong with that. And they invested their money smartly and they're going to retire and have an awesome retirement. But the people that's not for, like myself, that needs to have more control and more time freedom to kind of set my own schedule and spend time with the family, it's definitely worth pursuing.
Going back to the topic of risk and spending a little bit more. So now that you're on again, you're in the middle of your story, I'm saying, and as you said your effective hourly rate is literally in the four figures, $1,000 an hour plus. So my two questions for you are, one, have you loosened the purse strings on the budget a little bit since when you started? And then two, in order to build more conservatism into your family, into your personal financial plan, do you find yourself taking some of that very large income that you're receiving and diverting it into some sort of diversified way or just into some sort of conservative backstop to make sure that, even if the business, sputters from here, you don't have to go back to being a prison guard?
Yes, the purse strings have definitely increased. I'm not sure if it's having kids. I mean, you have a child as well.
Yeah.
Kids, for some reason, make you spend a lot of money. They're not cheap. We definitely have seen our budget from when we first got married till now, probably 2x at least. Just a bigger house, nicer cars. But we still live a very normal millionaire next door lifestyle. Like, we are not flashy in any way. We don't have Lambos or anything like that. That's not what we're about. We're about time freedom and spending time on the family and spending as much time together, quality time together. So, but yeah, as far as like eating out, we definitely eat out more than we used to. I love the ability to not really look at pricing. If I want a steak, I'm going to get a nice steak. That's just kind of the luxury of making more money. And we still have a budget that we stick to. This was actually, Mint closed down, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, a year and a half.
Yeah,
maybe.
We were huge users of Mint. Like, loved them, used them from when we were in college up till, living together and getting married. They closed down. I was like, we're making really good money. Let's try not budgeting and see how that works. And for 6 months, we did that. And I just kept looking at the credit card statements going up. And I was like, wait a second, this is ridiculous. Like, our name is literally the Savvy Couple. We need to get back on a budget here and live the life we're preaching here. So we reined things way back in, and just getting on a budget, I think we took our spending down like $3,000 a month, which is like wild and not too surprising, honestly. Without a budget, your spending goes crazy. So yes, the purse strings have definitely opened up, but we're definitely still smart with our money and make sure that we're spending it in the areas that bring us the most happiness and joy in our life. And then as far as you talked about diversification.
Yeah, diversification or conservatism or just building some cushion into your life.
We started the blog in 2016 and it kind of peaked about 2 years ago. Unfortunately, with AI and Google updates, our traffic has gotten hit quite a bit. So we've been kind of pivoting since then. We started investing in real estate last year, taking the cash flow and the extra income that we had with our 2 online brands. And, obviously we're maxing out our Roth IRAs every year. We're putting money into our SEP to continue to grow that as well. But on top of that, any income that we had, we were putting towards real estate. So we found a partner that used to work at the jail with me. He was actually our class captain and went through the academy with me. He became a real estate agent and was crushing it. And we went to a conference together, invested in our own skill set and learned more about real estate and got comfortable with what a partnership would look like. And we actually today, earlier at like 2 or 3, or I'm sorry, it's 3 now. Earlier today, we closed on our 7th long-term rental together. Super diversified. We're definitely, got tons of money in the stock market, and we got a rental portfolio that's cash flowing really well, and we're getting all the benefits of real estate. So, and then on top of that, we're pivoting, going all in on AI with all of our online businesses to continue to find growth.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Staying on the cutting edge. And speaking of that, or just speaking of kind of always looking for the best use of your time or the best use of your capital, here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. I love getting your questions, and some of you ask me questions about the wealth management firm I work for in Rochester, New York. Others ask about the Best Interest blog and this podcast, Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, which operate without advertising, without pushy sales, and with no paywalls. How can the blog and podcast stay afloat without me dumping my own money into it? Well, to answer both those questions, I want to point you to episode 78 of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. I intentionally recorded episode 78 to shine light on those topics and inform you how you are actually helping and can continue helping these projects carry forward. So if you've ever been curious about the business of my blog and podcast, or if you're curious about my day job in wealth management, please check out episode 78 and let me know what you think. Kind of pivoting back to the whole side hustle entrepreneurship, have you found that certain side hustles, certain small businesses tend to have a better return on an investment, whether it's financial or time-wise? Again, thinking back to our listeners who might have limited bandwidth and they only have time to pick one thing right now, is there some places that are just better uses of your time than others?
Certainly. I think, especially if you have limited time, you're married, you have a full-time job, you have kids, I think it's really important to look at stuff that has a high earnings per hour or something that you can scale. So, take, for example, Uber Eats or DoorDash. Those are like your F tier side hustles that, you're putting wear and tear on the car, you're paying for gas, you're paying for insurance, and you're making, at the end of the day, maybe $10 an hour. Plus you have to drive out there. So there's time that you're not getting paid. So we've always been big proponents of online side hustles and the ability to put the kids to bed, hop on a computer for 2 hours and make money, or at least learn the skills to make the money, because online is open 24/7. So with the right systems and the right traffic coming in, you can make money 24/7, 365. So whether you're on vacation, sleeping, whatever it may be, you're not putting wear and tear in your car. It's super flexible. You can work anywhere you want. You can even, don't say I said this, but you can even do some at work. If you have like an extra lunch break or, you're doing a little multitasking, you can get a little work in on your side hustle. I definitely did that. Hopefully Ryan doesn't hear this. I'm sure he knows. He's my old boss. But yeah, online income is definitely the one that we always promote. And what does that look like? We're big proponents of affiliate marketing. So if someone's trying to get into making money online, the easiest by far way to make money online, especially with cell phones now and TikTok and all that stuff, is just affiliate marketing. So you're basically promoting and selling a product that you don't even own, and you just send people to a link. So you create value, get them interested. Maybe it's a product on TikTok or a program that you purchased about AI and you learned a lot from it, and then you're going to promote it to others because you got a lot of value in it. And then you get a kickback, a commission. And it's super easy because there's no fulfillment. You're not, returning orders. You're not handling customer service. You're literally just creating content and getting a kickback with commission. So it's sales and marketing, which is super leverageable.
So let's dive in a little bit more into this online world, because it's the world of your and Brittany's expertise. I could see a listener sitting there right now, because I certainly felt this way 6 years ago when I was like, well, man, the internet is already saturated. There's so many creators. There are so many websites. How am I going to break into this space? And personally, at least one thing I think to myself is this term, there's riches in the niches. And every time out there, I see someone who their brand is, I talk about personal finance for attorneys under the age of 30 who are still in law school debt. I'm like, oh, that's a really nice niche because you're speaking to a very specific audience. But then again, I mean, you're the expert here. So I'm curious to hear, if you're breaking into this world in 2025, where do you start and where do you focus?
Yeah, it's true. The riches are in the niches. That's something we've always struggled with. I don't know if it's my ADHD and wanting to solve all problems and just capture everyone and not have that limiting mindset of I can only serve this person. But when you can serve that individual way better than serving everyone, that's when you're going to make way more money. But to answer your question, I really love, there's it's a Venn diagram. It's got 3 different quadrants. One of them is the skills that you already have. So what skills from work do you have, books that you've read, whatever experience, education, what skills do you already have? What are you passionate about? Whether it's personal finance, fitness, relationships, those are kind of the top 3 niches that people are going to make money from. And then what are you already good at? So what comes natural to you? And for us, we kind of did that Venn diagram, and the middle led to personal finance. So we originally started just teaching people how to be savvy with their money, be really frugal with their budget, save, invest. And then it kind of switched to, wow, I actually have been making money online since I was 13 years old. I know this stuff. I know marketing. I know sales. I know how to create content on a blog post that will kind of convert. So we switched to let's teach people how to make more money, because we realized in our life, it's great to invest. It's great to save money, but you can only save so much. And then your life becomes miserable. And we got to that point a couple of times in our kind of debt payoff journey. But we also realized saving money is great and you want to do that and you want to be disciplined with your budget. But if you can increase your income and have an extra $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 per month coming in, that is monumental compared to trying to save in your budget. So developing those skills and making money off of those on kind of those 3 quadrants and figuring out what niche to get into. And then just get out your phone and start making content. And an easy kind of another thing to do after you've kind of pick your niche is, all right, what problems does that avatar have? So I'm going to pick
when you say avatar, explain that. I mean, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. What does that mean?
So it's your ideal customer ideal viewer that's going to be viewing your content. So we'll pick like a niche of like 30-year-old married men that have, a newborn that are trying to stay in shape, super niched. And there's a lot of them that they put on just as much weight as their wife during marriage. I was one of them. I don't know why, I stress eat too. Figuring out ways to, all right, what problems do they have? Okay, they need to learn how to track their calories. Maybe they don't know how to get in the gym, or they're too self-conscious to get in the gym. They don't have a workout routine. Maybe they think that it's going to take too much time. List out all their problems and then go to ChatGPT and literally say, okay, create me an A to B map to transform this person's life and give me 20 different Instagram reels that I can create. And then bingo, you're already off to the races. And then you're literally recording stuff that you already know about and you're an expert in.
I love that idea. I think about that, and I'll open up the hood to listeners. I mean, I think about the people who I want to speak to. I think about the problems that they're facing. I think about people who I work with as clients at work. And in my mind, I have these avatars or ideal client profiles that there's a few different buckets of people who I tend to help. And there's a reason why I tend to focus my content on some of the more complex ideas. I tend to focus my content maybe on more retirement-focused ideas. I find those interesting. It's that Venn diagram that you were talking about, Kellen. Yeah, I find it interesting. It's intellectually stimulating. I'm good at explaining these ideas. It helps me at work. It helps me produce content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then whenever I'm struggling for content ideas, I just think back to what are the problems that my listeners are facing? There's a reason, listeners, why I ask you guys for AMA episodes. I mean, these episodes, they're great. They're so much fun to put together, and it's nothing but problems that you guys are telling me you're facing. And then boom, here are the answers. So it's just this really fun and kind of generous flywheel of content that spins around and around. But back to you, Kellen. We haven't talked about it quite yet. You've alluded to it once or twice, but going back to the whole niches things, you started as a savvy couple, this very kind of family focused. Any family in America could benefit from that. Well, that's not very niched. But then I know Brittany, your wife, she niched down into the savvy mama, which is a lot more focused on mothers and from what I gather, kind of like younger mothers, right? People, So how's that project been?
Yeah, it's been good. We kind of took what we did with the Savvy Couple with kind of running a blog and, affiliate marketing. And we knew the writing on the wall of eventually we're going to lose traffic from Google, from the Savvy Couple and affiliate marketing. And we need to go more YouTube, and we need to get reoccurring revenue coming in because we don't want our businesses to die if the traffic dies. We started the Savvy Mama, and she helps moms control the chaos in their life with meal planning, meal prep, budgeting, cleaning binders, all this stuff that kind of gets them organized, gets them in a good routine, and gets them to be the CEO of the house. And then on the back end of that, we had a sales funnel that was getting a lot of traffic from the blog and from social media and paid ads. And then one day we hired a business coach, and he was like, well, why don't you guys just put a membership button on one upsell page? So, you're checking out and there's a one-time offer that pops up. We're like, sure, we'll do that. We turned it on, and within a week, we had 15 people sign up, and we were like, wait. Something, we're onto something here. So it's super low tickets, like $9 a month, but she's got 1,200 members in it, and it's just an awesome reoccurring revenue, and it's super hands off for her. And, the moms are getting tons of resources to help them within the house. So it's been really good.
That's so cool. And I can allude to that. I think I see, do you use Kit as your email provider? Yeah. I was going to say, I joined Kit a couple months ago. Kit's got so much cool functionality, and this might be too much in the weeds for the average listener, but all I'll say is it allowed me to experiment with some things, including some white papers that I put together, helpful educational white paper. Download this white paper. It's a lead magnet. People will end up subscribed to my email newsletter. And I saw it kind of click and work. And I was like, okay, I need to refine this and make it better and better and better and better. When you see something like that in your business, kind of on your entrepreneurial journey, it's such a unique feeling to optimize and make it better and better. Speaking of the entrepreneurial journey, not everything goes well. I wanted to ask you whether it's just the most common mistakes that you've seen from others, and maybe this is two separate questions. I'd love to know something that you and Brittany really thought was going to work up front, or something you thought about entrepreneurship up front, but that now you've completely changed your mind on. So take that either direction you want, or both, Kellen, but whether it's mistakes that you've made or just big lessons that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I think the questions go hand in hand. So our biggest mistake is we kind of saw a ton of growth with blogging and SEO, and we got really, really good at it and had a team and was using AI, and it was really scalable. We could leverage it quite a bit. So we, at one point, I think had 4 or 5 blogs. Some of them were brand new side projects, and then we kind of condensed them all into the 2. And the problem that we ran into was just lack of focus. Like I was so scatterbrained on like, okay, this blog needs this blog needs this team needs this system needs to come into play. So I think the biggest mistake that people make in entrepreneurship is shiny object syndrome. A lot of people that start in entrepreneurship and start a business, they're very much like me and have ADHD, and they just see all these cool things that we can do. When we really buckled down and just focused on the Savvy Couple, and that was our one thing, that's when we saw exponential growth over time and really saw it blow up and have that hockey stick kind of growth. So I think it's being really, really focused and setting up quarterly goals where these are the 3 goals that we're going after, and then break those down into like a couple KPIs. You're getting over people's heads here, probably.
That's okay.
Key performance indicators. And then, just breaking it down into like daily tasks that move the needle and just staying super hyper focused on those things and not getting distracted.
That's a great tip. And that's a great tip for just people in their financial plan too. I mean, the number of times an investor, now generally we try to avoid things like investing in individual stocks or, chasing the hot stock, this or that. The long-term investor focuses on other things. But I mean, we've all heard those kind of stories from investing of, well, I heard from my bowling partner that I should be doing this thing, or I saw a commercial for this business and I think I should invest in it. And the investor who just chases the shiny object almost always ends up worse off for it.
I have a story on that. So I did some stock trading back in the day with Robinhood, did some options trading, and I'm a pretty emotional person, kind of ride my emotions. So getting into the weeds and like doing that and seeing the numbers go up is like exhilarating, but then seeing it go down is like, oh my gosh, my life's going to end. So I've found, and by the numbers, like the numbers say strictly like I don't do any kind of individual stocks investment anymore. I do super broad index funds and set it and forget it type of investing, and in it for the long haul on companies that I believe in. And it's super diversified. So I definitely recommend that approach when it comes to investing. Obviously you want maybe, 1 to 5% where you're taking home runs and on stuff that you truly believe in, whether it's, Bitcoin or an individual stock, individual company, a company you're starting. But overall, set it and forget it, and boring investing is the way to go 100%. And the numbers show on my Robinhood account for sure.
Yeah. No, that is the way to build that path towards financial freedom.
Yep.
And speaking of building freedom and freedom builders, I see the word freedom on your t-shirt, and I wanted to give you a chance. I know you guys are working on this freedom builders concept. Can you tell us a little bit about this, Kellen? And then just to wrap it up, how can people reach out to you and start following along?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram pretty actively. We do daily stories and post quite often. It's just at the Savvy Couple. And yeah, we recently realized that we've always had people reaching out like, how do we get one-on-one time with you or coaching with you? And it's like, we don't offer that. Our time's too precious and we just don't have the time to do that. But it's been more and more in our hearts to kind of create this community of people that are wanting more out of life. They're wanting more than a 9 to 5. They're wanting to reach financial freedom quicker and have a game plan to do so. So we're starting a wait list for a community called Freedom Builders, and it's going to help married couples basically get aligned with their vision for their life, and then master their money, and then come up with a blueprint to create income online and create additional streams of income, whether that's affiliate marketing, using AI with local businesses, real estate, and we're going to have weekly coaching and just have this awesome community of Freedom Builders. So that's kind of what we're working on.
That's awesome. Can we get a link? We'll get a link to that and throw it in the show notes, but how can people find it?
We're putting together the wait list now. It's like something brand new. So yeah, I'll give you the link after this and they can click it in the show notes. It'll most likely be thesavvycouple.com/Freedom Builders waitlist.
Awesome. Yep. We will keep an eye out for that and include it in the show notes. Well, hey, Kellen Klein of The Savvy Couple and more, and many different projects and side hustles. Thanks for joining us on Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. If you have a question for Jesse to answer on a future episode, send him an email over at his blog, The Best Interest. His email address is jesse@bestinterest.blog. Again, that's jesse@bestinterest.blog. Did you enjoy the show? Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. This helps others find the show and invest in knowledge themselves. And we really appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors is a personal podcast meant for education and entertainment. It should not be taken as financial advice, and it's not prescriptive of your financial situation.